What is going on, guys? Jeff here, Corals Unlimited. Today we got a brand new video for you. We're going to be taking a look at the Nano Reef tank build that we've been working on here on the YouTube channel, and we're going to be adding some corals to the tank today. But before we jump into that, if this is your first time being here, this is where I talk about everything reef tank related. So if you love the reef like I do, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell so you can be notified every single time that I upload a new video. All right, so last week we added some rock flowers to the Nano Reef tank. If you want to check that video out, I'll put a link to it in the description below. So this little green guy with the orange lipstick is kind of nestled in here at the bottom of the rock work, and then our red guy moved all the way over here to the side. So in last week's video we talked about nems and adding them to your tank, and you want to get them in there kind of early so they can get settled down before you start adding corals to a tank, whether it's nano tank, large tank, whatever the case may be. So we got these guys, they kind of settled down. The red one's still kind of wandering a little bit, but I feel comfortable enough because they're both kind of staying relatively low in the rock work. So I feel like if we get some corals in here today, if we put them like maybe in the middle, depending on what we grab for some species, I think that will work out pretty good. But the nems have settled down, so I feel safe with adding some corals to the Nano Reef tank. But before we get into that, we need to talk about some of the safe measures that we need to do before we add coral to any reef tank. So when you're talking about adding corals to Nano Reef tanks, it's really important to consider the size of the tank. And not all corals that are available to hobbyists are ideal candidates for a Nano Reef tank. And if you jump back a little bit further in this playlist, you will find two top 10 videos, one that is for corals that are ideal for a Nano Reef tank, and then one that are corals that you should avoid putting into a Nano Reef tank. That isn't to say, because there's plenty of people that chimed in on those videos, that it's impossible to keep a Nano Reef tank with these corals. It just may require you staying on top of it a little bit more and not just leaving it alone and letting it do its thing. And for me, when I'm selecting corals for a Nano Reef tank, I'm really looking for corals that are not going to sting their neighbors, that are not going to fight with their neighbors, and corals that are not going to grow too fast. So if you're just getting started and are looking to pick out a coral for your reef tank, go check those videos out, and they'll give you a good idea as to what to expect with corals that you should avoid, and then corals that are ideal for that tank. So a real important consideration with your corals, and probably even more so important than really anything else, maybe the closest next thing would be water chemistry, is what type of light did you select for your tank. Now there's a lot of different lights on the market. A lot of folks tend to gravitate towards budget lights, especially if they're just getting started with the hobby. I would consider the Kessel, which was the light that we put on this tank, to be a budget light, at least in this instance. And the one drawback to the Kessel is that there's no controllability with it. But what I like about it is it doesn't matter how blue or how white you keep the light, the corals are going to get the spectrum of color that they need. Might not be the most powerful light out there. At some point we'll probably put a power meter on the tank and take a look at the actual strength of this light. But today, that's really outside the scope of this video. We're going to be picking out some corals. We're going to dip them, which that's a very important thing to talk through, and we're going to add them to the tank. All right, so this is some of the items that I use to dip corals. This has been a dip kit I've used quite a bit. Basically consists of a 2-gallon painter's bucket, just a container. I think there was some PVC fittings in there, and then last but not least, turkey baster. And that will do the majority of your dipping that you'll ever need. I also like using these bins. I get these at the dollar store, or what was formerly known as a dollar store, and that I like because it gives you the ability to get a little bit more corals in the container. Still using about a gallon of water, I guess, is what I typically mix at. And then coral dips. There's quite a few different coral dips out there. These are the two that I probably use the most. I use Coral Clean, which is a iodine-based dip, and then Coral RX. I've been using that for forever. Both of those work really, really well. And every once in a while, I'll also use like a flatworm exit type dip in the event that I think that there's something going on with the corals. So right here is the basic items that you need to dip corals. It doesn't have to be too complicated. I've used Cool Whip containers, pretty much anything that will hold water in the past. You just might want to adjust your ratio of what or how much solution you're using per container volume, but I typically work with a gallon just to make it really easy for myself, and that seems to work pretty well for me. I guess from a filming standpoint, it'd probably be easier to use this. We won't use that 2-gallon bucket, but we will use this container and then the turkey baster. So what I'm going to do is put about a gallon of water in here. We'll put in some Coral RX, and then we'll give it about a 15-minute bath in that solution. We're using salt water that is at temp. You can pull it right from your reef tank if you want to, and then you discard it after. It doesn't go back into your tank because it's going to definitely cause some problems. And with that, that's what this container here is for. So this is the dip solution container, and then this is a salt water, a newly mixed salt water container that I'll fill up, and I'll rinse the corals off before I put them into the reef tank. So we're going to get our water, we're going to put our dip solution in there. We're only going to use one. We'll use the Coral RX, and then we'll give the corals a 15-minute bath in that solution. Then we'll rinse them off and put them into the Nano Reef tank. There's our gallon of tank water, and it's 30 drops of the Coral RX. I'm going to swirl that up a little bit. That will bubble, very normal, and it does have a strong smell. At least the Coral RX has a strong smell to it. Most of them have a smell to it, so it makes it easy to distinguish if it has coral dip in it or not. We're going to get some rinse water, and then let's grab some corals. Alright, so we got our candy cane, put him in the dip, and then we got our little zoanthid there. And then the whole process of actually dipping the coral isn't just, hey, you throw it in there, then you walk away. It should be, you're agitating the water. You want to make sure that you're not getting the corals, if you're doing two different species at the same time, that they're touching each other, so you want to keep them away from one another. But it is perfectly fine to dip multiple corals at the same time, and they will close up, they will react. Sometimes they put off mucus. It's pretty normal, but we'll do this whole process for about 10 minutes, and then we'll rinse them off and then add them to the Nano Reef tank. Alright, so it's been about 15 minutes, and quite often when you buy corals, which will, alright, I'm getting ahead of myself. So what I'm going to do now is, I've been told that I'm a little anal with this, but it's something that I started doing a while ago, and there is, some thoughts behind why I do it. So typically what I'll do is I'll grab the coral with my offhand, so my left hand. This hand's not going to go into the tank, and then I will transfer it to my dominant hand, right-handed, and then I will rinse it. And the idea behind that is, now I could go and take this coral and then place it into the tank, because it, hopefully it's been removed of anything that potentially could be there. This hand went into the dip. If I go and put this hand into that tank, you're putting dip into the tank, and that can cause problems with your invertebrates. So that's why I swap hands while I'm grabbing corals and then rinsing them off. So this guy is a zoanthid. He's ready to go into the tank at this point, and I wanted to cover something real quickly about placing your corals, and for folks that are really new, you can see how it has like this little plug. So there's a stem, then there's a little disc, and then the coral's on the disc. Some folks don't like this. Some folks don't care, because eventually the coral can overgrow that, and then you don't really see it that much. But if you're in a situation like where we're going to place this coral, you basically are in a situation where you want to remove that little stem right there. All you need to do is just get yourself some frag cutters and literally just cut that stem right off. Came off pretty easy. That's not to say that all frag plugs are created equal. The 3D printed frag plugs are awful for cutting even with a saw. But these ceramic ones are the ones that I prefer to use. They cut relatively easy. There's not a lot of strain. And the more you strain, the more potential risk you're putting yourself at for injury, which I've lived that life. So let's go ahead and rinse this guy off one more time. And let's grab, actually what we need to do is set the tank up first. So we'll go ahead and just put this guy in the rinse water. And we got to remove the cover, and then I'm going to put down some paper towels just so if things get crazy with the glue, we're not going to make a mess of things. All right, so we're going to take the cover off. Make sure the water stays in the tank. That's just evaporation that's running off from that. I want to put this little zoanthid on this little cliff right here facing forward. I think that's where we actually put the rock flower, but he decided to pick up and move to the other side of the rock. So we're going to put them right where we wanted that little rock flower to hang out. So we're going to go ahead, we got our stem removed from the coral plug. We got our, whoop, super glue's already going crazy. And really all we're doing here is just enough glue to get that guy to stick where we want him to stick. So in the event that a critter crawls over him, he's going to stay in place. All right, so with the candy cane, whoop, almost grabbed with the wrong hand. We're going to leave the stem on this time. We're not even going to use any super glue on this one, but we are going to rinse it, just like we typically do. We're going to give this hand a little rinse, get some of that dip off there, and then we're just going to use that stem of that plug and actually put it into a hole in the rock. All right, so we got our little candy cane there tucked in with the stem in, and then we took the stem off this zoanthid right here, which both these guys look pretty pitiful right now after going through the dip. It'll take them a few days to kind of straighten out, and then they'll open up like as they should. Probably tomorrow they should be fine. So adding corals to your tank isn't really that difficult at all, and definitely make sure you dip anything that you add to your tank. But if you want to learn more about Nano Reef tanks, check this video out. I will see you over there.